Much for taking some time out of your busy day to learn about CodeDay, this really awesome event that you have volunteered to help with, and to learn a little bit more about how it all works and how things will look on the day of. So without taking too much longer, I do want to jump into things, but I do want to just sort of mention two things right off the bat. One of which is that CodeDay is a worldwide event. So even though we'll be talking about a lot of things as if, this is a specific one code day, there are a lot of different code days. And while most of them are 95% the same, not everything I say is going to apply to every single code day. So with that in mind, if there's any specific questions, like, you want to know what the lunch is going to be like at CodeDay Chicago, the best thing to do is actually to reply to any email you have from us at all and ask us the question, and we will forward it on to the right person. Second thing I wanted to really quickly bring up is that there are a few different roles that we're going to be talking about today. So judges, volunteers, mentors. And once we get through the part talking about your role, feel free to drop out of the call. There's not really going to be anything later on that's generally relevant. We put that all right at the beginning, so we can be as respectful of your time as possible. But there are going to be a few different roles, and not everyone signed up for every single role, obviously. So, feel free to stick around only for the parts that are relevant. So with that out of the way, what are the three roles we're going to be talking about? Well, we're going to talk about judges, which is Sunday, 9 a.m. to noon. And as a judge, really what you're going to be doing is you're going to be meeting teams, which is exciting for you, but you're also going to be providing networking. And for many students, this is going to be the first time that they've met someone who is a professional working for a tech company. And so networking is a really great opportunity. The other thing that you're going to be doing is deciding on awards, obviously, because you're a judge. Mentors, Saturday 2-hour shifts. We'll talk about shifts in just a second, but again, same deal. You're going to be providing the networking for the students. Like, getting to meet you is a really big part of why we want you there. It's a really big benefit for a lot of our students. The other thing you're going to be doing is, obviously, again, from the title, you can kind of tell, helping debug problems, project management, design, et cetera, et cetera. And then volunteers, again, Saturday, typically 2-hour shifts. You're going to be helping with things like event logistics and activities. Now, the times on Saturday for mentors and volunteers, if you notice, we didn't write specific times. If your event has asked you to sign up for a specific slot, or you have already been asked to come at a specific time, you should follow those instructions. However, if you haven't heard anything in particular from your event, it means that we don't really care exactly when you show up. We think that it'll be helpful regardless of when you're there. And so if you haven't heard anything from your local event team and you're a mentor, we recommend coming anytime between 1 to 2 p.m. and 8 to 10 p.m. Anytime between those two times, and I know I gave you ranges, so let's just say 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. Anytime between there is typically where it's going to be most helpful. You're welcome to come earlier or later, but you're typically not going to have much to do. If you're volunteers, same thing applies, except I would say that, you could actually show up as early as an hour before the start time of the event. We'd still have things for you to do. So again, if you have heard something specific from your event team, go with that specific time, whether it be a slot that you signed up for or a specific request. But if you haven't, anything in that range should be fine. Okay, so with that out of the way, the date for most cities is going to be Saturday, February 15th. If you're a volunteer or a mentor, that's going to be the day you're going to want to go. And if you're a judge, you're going to want to be there on Sunday, February 16th. Chicago and Bellevue, Washington only are the weekend later. Now, those are the same dates that have been on our website, and they're the same dates that are in all of the emails that you've gotten from us. So with that in mind, it shouldn't really come as a surprise. And if you want to double check your calendar, feel free, but it's not something where you should need to update anything. Okay, so when you arrive at the event, how do you know who to talk to? A lot of our volunteers will be people who are like college students, and so it might be a little bit hard to spot them. What you're going to want to be looking for is either one of these red badges with a photo and a name on them. You can see they'll say staff or code evangelist. There are some black badges too, which are employees. Those are the people that are generally going to be the most in charge. Not every event has name badges for various reasons. The new events in particular might not have them yet. And if that's the case, you can also keep an eye out for a bright orange, it's like an orangish red CodeDay t-shirt. Or you can just look for the people who look like they're in charge and telling people what to do. People with paper name badges or the blue plastic name badges, those people are typically not going to have the answer to every question that you might have. In particular, people with paper name badges are often just attendees. So you can ask them if you can't find anyone else, but if you can find someone who is wearing one of those bright orange CodeDay shirts or has one of those plastic red badges, those are typically going to be the best people to ask. Okay, so let's get into the specific roles now. So if you have signed up as a judge, this is what you need to know. For most events, judging is going to take place 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. During the judging period, what you're going to do, and by the way, that's right when we told you to get there, so please don't be, don't be late. What you're going to do during judging is you're actually going to walk around and talk to the teams and try out their projects. It's not going to be a presentation, you're actually going to get to try them. At larger events, we might split the judges into different groups, and you might not actually get to try every single game individually. And if that's the case, we'll just try to make sure that one judge tries every game, but maybe not every judge tries every game. But that is actually the judging period. And then the way that most events do things is that then from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., the students actually present what they made to their family and friends. And while they're presenting what they made to their family and friends, you're actually going to be deliberating on who gets what award. So that helps us save a lot of time and keep things moving quickly for the students who've just been up for 24 hours. And it's very respectful of your time. It really shortens things for you because you don't need to see the presentations. In particular, you don't need to see presentations from a bunch of sleep-deprived students who are not going to give that good of a presentation to begin with. Smaller events may still have you watch the presentations because they're not going to be that long. So again, it's one of those things that changes a little bit from CodeDay to CodeDay, but either way, that sort of part where you're walking around and trying the demos is what you're going to want to base most of your judging on. The judging criteria, difficulty and effort is going to be number one. So it's going to be really how much effort did you put in. This is one of those really unique things about CodeDay is that we want beginners to be on the same foot as really advanced students. So it's really important that you're asking the questions that you need to find out how difficult was this project for this student. Did they know how to do it when they walked in the door, or did they really push themselves and take a risk? Creativity and fun is going to be the second thing. We really, this is an event that is targeted towards students who maybe have more of an artistic background, more of a creative background, and we really want to see that in the projects that come out of this. And so it's not just going to be about technical, what is the most technically impressive. You're typically going to want to, look at what is actually fun and interesting and new. And then the last and the least important is going to be polish. And that's just kind of everything else. And a lot of that is stuff that you would normally judge on in other events. Explicitly, we don't want you to consider business models because, again, that's not really what CodeDay is about. The awards you're going to want to give out, and you can see what they look like. They're going to be holographic awards. You can see them on the right-hand side of this slide. Typically, the way you're going to want to consider it is, first of all, best in class. You're going to want to do a best in class app and game at most events. It's up to you how you want to break that down. If you have only apps, you could say best in class educational app and best in class utility app, for example. But best in class is sort of the second place award. So you get to give a second place award for best game and best app. And then the top overall is the best one for the entire event. And there's only one of those. So we give out the top overall to the one that most blew you away. And there's no distinction between app or game. So again, the best in class is kind of like second place in the app category, second place in the game category. And the best in show is going to be the top overall, the number one best out of all the categories. And then finally, you have some special prizes. Most judging teams will give out 2 to 4 special prizes, but it's up to you. And these can be for anything you'd like. Some common ones are 0 to 60 for the beginner team that made the most progress, the fastest acceleration. Most technically impressive, best design, app we'd most like to see in the App Store. You can sort of go wild and come up with whatever it is that you would like to recognize. There's a physical number of awards that we have. And so with that in mind, if you're going to be giving out a special prize to a really large team, probably want to keep it to 2 special prizes. If you're going to be giving out a special prize to a bunch of individuals, maybe you could even give 5 or 6. So keep that in mind. Okay, so that's it for judges. So if you are a judge, feel free to hop off, and we will be excited to see you at CodeDay. For mentors, we're going to get into a little bit more of the details. Mentoring is a little bit more complicated at CodeDay, so here we go. So again, 2-hour shifts on Saturday unless you've been asked to sign up for a specific time. And you'll be helping attendees in general with coding, project management, design, and morale. We're going to focus a lot on the coding things, but I just want to really quickly touch on some of the other ones as well. Project management in particular is really, really helpful at CodeDay. A lot of these students are high school students, and if you think back to when you were in high school, typically your teachers would just assign you due dates for things. And so being in a situation where they're not given a specific due date and a specific order of things they need to do is often very, very confusing for them. And they have a lot of difficulty prioritizing, cutting features, things like that. So project management is very helpful. Design is also going to be really helpful. There's so many different types of designers. It's hard to touch on just how many different ways you can help teams with design. But design is also another one of those that's going to be very, very helpful. Again, we're not going to talk about the specifics today because that's really, I think you're going to have a lot better of an idea of where to help out with these things. But just keep in mind, a lot of students are going to be making games. Some students are going to be making apps. Even if it's a game, there's a lot of user interface that goes into that. There's a lot of usability that goes into that. So there's that. And finally, every type of mentor can help out with morale. If you notice a team is starting to get frustrated, oftentimes they won't want to take a break because they feel bad. But it's your job to encourage them to take that break and to to make sure that they're still having fun at this event, because these are new programmers that are going to be, it's not necessarily the most fun thing in the world to them yet. Okay, so if you only remember one thing from this presentation and you're a mentor, this is the thing that I want you to remember. It's that attendees are afraid of you. And what that looks like at the event is that attendees will not want to go and ask you questions. If you go to CodeDay and you feel like it wasn't necessarily, you didn't end up doing much, you just kind of sat around the entire time and maybe it wasn't the best use of your time, we've heard that from mentors sometimes. And then we've also seen at the same event from the participant surveys, participants saying, yeah, I really wish I got more help. That is because participants are afraid to ask you because they feel like you're such a great person for working in the tech industry, and your time must be so valuable, and they don't want to ask you a stupid question. So it's really, really, really important that you, as mentors, are proactive in soliciting questions from students, because they will not, by and large, come up and ask you questions, even though most students do have one. So, one recommendation that we have to get around this is what we call a BiHour CheckIn. And basically just at the start of your shift, or if you're going to be there for more than 2 hours, just every 2 hours, go to every single team and ask them, what is your ultimate goal? What have you done since you last talked to a mentor or an event staff or someone else? What do you want to get done in the next 2 hours? And who's doing what? These are questions that tend to bring out a lot of problems that teams might have, and they give you a really good place to start working with teams and figuring out how you can help. So whether you want to do this team by team and then help them with their problems and then move on to the next one, or if you want to walk to every single team as soon as you come in, meet all of them, and then find out, decide from there which teams you want to help in what order, is up to you. But we do recommend that at least every 2 hours while you're at CodeDay, that you go and do a check-in with the teams and just see where they're at. That is really, really, really helpful. And it helps to prevent that issue of, teams being afraid to ask you questions. When you're answering questions, it's also important to remember that these students are new at programming and they don't really know what they're doing. And if you just answer their questions, they won't really ever learn how to solve them themselves. So rather than answering questions directly, we encourage you to ask questions in return. So if someone comes and asks you a programming question, you can respond with, what have you searched for? What areas of your code might relate to this? Tell me how your code works. It's rubber duck debugging. And what have you tried so far? I typically, when I'm at a code day, I'll try to, for every single question that I get, ask at least one question in return before I give them any hints whatsoever. Because a lot of students just don't understand. They think that there are programming experts, right? And they think that because you have a degree or you have a job or whatever else in some sort of technical field, that you are an expert because you've gotten that degree, you know the answer to every single question in existence related to that topic. And that once they, if they really get into this and they try hard and they spend, 4 years at college learning all of this, then they'll know the answer to every question too. And obviously that's not the case, and it's not setting them up for success. So it's really important that you don't play into that myth and that you help students learn that programming and technical careers are something where you're problem solving every day, where you're looking for answers every day and debugging constantly, and that you really don't fall into that pit of being seen as an expert who knows the answer to everything. Because a lot of the questions you're going to get asked are very, very introductory level, and it's important to convey that the only reason you know the answer to how to fix a commit in Git is because you've done it 1,000 times yourself, but you didn't know the answer at some point too. When it comes to specific languages, this is a question we get asked a lot. What language will participants be using? There's no single required language. Most beginners will be using something called Construct 3, which is what we teach in our beginner workshop. Some beginners will also be using Scratch, which is a really common one that schools use. I'm not going to get into the specifics of Scratch. We typically won't teach it at a code day, but some students might already come in with some Scratch knowledge. It looks a little bit more like a traditional programming language. You're probably going to be able to figure it out. Everyone else is going to usually be using Java, Python, HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. Usually nothing too exotic if they're going to ask for your help. I'm going to really quickly go into what the basics of Construct 3 look like, just to give you to help you orient yourself when you're at the event as you're trying to solve problems. I will mention that Construct has really good documentation online, and most things that you want to do can be found with a Google search or by just poking around in the interface. Okay, so when you look at Construct, it runs in a web browser, and this is what you'll see. So the main area right there is the world map. This is the camera. The dotted line is the camera. The camera can be moved, and we'll really quickly touch on how to do that because it's a common thing students will want to do. Each thing on the left hand of the screen in the world map is an instance of an object, and the object types, the classes, whatever you want to call it, are stored in the right-hand side of the screen in a folder called Object Types. Construct is a JavaScript-based language. It uses JavaScript's style of object-oriented programming, which is called prototypal, where everything is sort of a clone of an individual prototype which exists in the world. So it's a little bit more confusing, but you can more or less think of it as any object-oriented programming language where you have your object types on the right and the instances on the left. If you double click on either an instance of an object or the object type, you will open an image editor. If you're a designer, maybe this is one of the things that you would want to pay the most attention to here. A few buttons to be aware of. The folder button, counterintuitively, is what you use to open files. So if you want to import an image, that's how you do it. The crop button crops the image, but it also does that for collision. So if you have a small image in a big box, that's obviously useful to crop it so that you're not colliding in the empty air. The little sort of center button edits the centroid. So if you're having problems with rotations, or the students are having problems with rotations where the things are rotating weirdly, it's usually because it's not rotating around the center. That's how you would fix that. And then finally, the very bottom leftmost one is for editing the collision polygon if you want to do something that's not a square. At the very bottom and to the right, you can also see there's some things for animations and different types of animations. I'm not going to go into that in this particular instance, but like you can find them online. Just be aware you can do animations. On the left-hand side is where you can see the properties for a specific selected object. It doesn't apply it to all the objects, only the one that has been selected, unless you've selected the object type, in which case it'll apply to all new objects that are created from that object type. If you right-click on an object type, not an instance, but you right-click on the object type itself, there's a behaviors button. Behaviors are kind of like what other languages call either traits or mix-ins, or I think Unity calls it components. But it's like a set of code that is commonly used. And the way that I explained it to students is that if you can think, maybe more than 90% of games are probably going to need this, there's a good chance that it's in a behavior. And in particular, the ones that'll be really useful are things like car controls, 8-direction controls, platforming controls. Platforming is really interesting because it will add gravity, it'll add keyboard controls, and it'll add collisions automatically. And if you click on a platform and you apply the solid behavior, then that's how it tells that it's a platform that you can land on. So the really, really basics of things will be in a behavior. And that'll also include things like there's a behavior called scroll to that makes the camera follow the character. Anything that's more advanced is going to be in what's called an event sheet. And this is where really most of the coding actually happens. Now, we don't really recommend that students try to implement behaviors in the code sheets, but they could. The reason for that is because, again, most of these students aren't here because they're excited about learning coding. They're excited about making a video game. And using behaviors lets them make a video game faster so that they get excited about coding and want to learn how it's implemented later. So please don't tell students not to use behaviors. We want them to use behaviors wherever they can because it lets them make something faster. However, when we get into these event sheets, this is where we start getting into the coding part of this. So the left-hand side of an event sheet is where we register our event handlers. So we say when X happens, and then the right-hand side is where we register the body of the event handler, the sort of method itself, like what do we want, what action do we want to occur. By default, each layout, which is kind of like a level, has a corresponding event sheet. So you can see layout 1, event sheet 1. There, if we made another level or another layout, it would be layout 2, event sheet 2. That is one of those things where you can change it, but you don't really need to. Over here, you can do lots of things. You can include a different event sheet. You can add variables and all sorts of things, but most student teams are never going to need that. Okay, so that is going to go ahead and wrap it up for us for mentors. So if you are a mentor and you're not doing anything else, feel free to leave the webinar now. You're welcome to stick around if you'd like, but there's not going to be anything else specifically related to mentors for the rest of this. So, volunteers. Let's talk about how to be a volunteer at CodeDay. So it's a few tasks that you might be asked to do it as a volunteer. You'll generally be able to get a lot of instruction locally, but we're going to go through some of the basics here anyway. So setup, check-in, security, food and drink, photos, and team registration. So for setup, you might be asked to help move things in from like a car or something else, so just like moving in soda and snacks. You might be asked to arrange tables and chairs in a specific way. We have a sign kit that includes a bunch of default signs that you might be asked to put up for things like wayfinding, areas that are off limits, or just general welcome and code of conduct signs. You could be asked to set up the check-in area, which would mean things like putting out stickers and setting up a computer, the kickoff area, which might mean moving chairs around, and other areas in the event. And you might be asked to set up or run AV during the event. So just like clicking through slides and things like that. If you're asked to do check-in specifically, like if you're asked to run check-in during the event, one thing to keep in mind is that we want you to be friendly and welcoming at the expense of efficiency. It doesn't matter if you get through the line as quickly as possible. You are the first person that everyone is going to see when they walk in the door, and we want them to get the impression that they are welcome here, even though maybe they're a little bit hesitant. So make sure to ask them a question like, what made you register for this event? Do you have any ideas for games or apps you want to make? Things like that. When you're checking people in, you're going to be using this tool, which is called Clear. One of our event staff will have to log you in because it contains student data, and so it's not just publicly available. At the top, you have a search box. You can either enter someone's name, so I'll usually just say, spell your last name for me, and just start typing it in, and it'll filter it down. Or if they brought a printed ticket, and you don't have a barcode scanner, which most events don't at this point, underneath the barcode will be a series of letters in groups of 3. Just enter in a few letters, and again, it'll filter it down. If a person is a student, meaning they have a red bar, there is information that is absolutely required. Age and parent information is absolutely required because if something happens to them, we need to know how to get in contact with their parent. Also, they need to sign a waiver. If any of this information is required, you'll see it'll say missing. And if you try to check them in, you'll get an error sound, and the check-in button will change. If any of this information is missing, all you need to do is click the information, and then it will open up a page where either you can type it in, or you can turn the computer around and give it to the student to fill out. As is the case for the waiver, they would have to sign it, so you would have to show it to them. Once they've filled out that information, again, the check-in box, which shows up like that, if they were missing any information, will change to a check-in box that says force check-in. And if you click that again, it'll force them to check in. So again, you don't really want to click that unless you've collected all the information first. If there's no problem and everything is collected or they're not required to get that information, then you'll see that it says exempt. Cool. If you're asked to do security at the event, so here's another thing that's pretty common. Everyone must be checked out. Everyone who leaves the event needs to check out, and it'll look just like the check-in system. Non-minors, which in most places is 18, but in some places is 19, can leave when they want. They don't need anyone's permission, but they do still need to check out. If they are a minor, they either need a parent to pick them up, or they need a note from a parent. Or you can call their parent if you're feeling really, generous. Just make sure you actually call. Text message is not really okay because we've had students try to forge text messages before. So if you're doing security and someone is a minor, which would show up when you're trying to check them out, you just need to make sure to either call their parent, get a note from a parent, or see that the parent is there to pick them up. They can't just leave on their own. Food and drink. This is another thing you might be asked to do. It's going to vary depending on the event. Generally, we serve lunch, dinner, breakfast, and snacks. And usually this is just going to be like putting out food, helping make sure students take the right amount, going around and distributing snacks, nothing super complicated, but the specific times and everything else is going to just depend on your specific code day. Okay, and the last one we're going to talk about is photos and team registration. So for photos and team registration, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to collect the team name and description and a photo. There's a tool to do this all online, and again, you'll need a login from a staff member. You can open it on your phone or on your laptop, and this is basically what it looks like. So you have each team, we're going to collect a team name, like a one-sentence description of what they make, very, very brief, and then you can upload a photo by clicking on the photo section. Make sure to save each one individually. The save buttons don't save other teams, so like if you fill out all of the team photos and then click save on one of them, the rest of the team photos will not show up. But yeah, it's pretty simple, and this is a really common thing that we ask volunteers to do as well, because we don't want to distract the students by making them register for a tool. It's easier for us to just go around and collect it all. So with that in mind, that is actually it for this presentation. I wanted to thank you all again for coming to the webinar and taking time out of what I'm sure is a really busy day. And we're really excited to have you helping us with CodeDay. So if you have any other questions, again, feel free to reach out, just reply to any email that we've sent you. And other than that, don't be too worried about it. If there are other questions that you have, it's also, we have people who ignore every single email we send them, and they just show up on the day of CodeDay, and they do great. It's not a super stressful event, and a lot of what you're contributing is really just by being there and helping the students get to know you. So with that in mind, thank you so much, and if you do have any questions, feel free to send them by email to us, and we'll see you at CodeDay.